Last time we spoke about, each week we've tried to take either fundamental idea or even concept, and we try to see how Rav Kook deals with it, with the basic working theory being is that the phrase we use at the beginning is a paradigm shifting approach, where each time we come and look at it, either a concept or a phrase, and we see how Rav Kook gives a whole new look at all the things we already knew, things that we're already familiar with, and gives them a whole new, is able to understand them in a completely different way, but in such a way that uses all the information that came first. So we started off by talking about Torah and science, and then we went on to talk about freedom. We spoke about kfira, as we spoke about last week, the last session, and we saw all the different ways in which he does that. What we're going to talk about now, and hopefully we'll have time for both sides of the page, is the national spirit. Okay. Now, a lot of times when you tell people about Rav Kook, so you immediately hear people say, "Oh, he's the father of religious Zionism. He was the rabbi of the Mizrahi, or he was a big Zionist." Of course, he was all these things, but I actually stayed clear of that for the first 5 classes because Rav Kook's approach to Zionism was the conclusion of a much, much bigger philosophy and approach. And it's not the beginning, it's the nafkamina, it's the end. And there's so much more to what Rav Kook was. One of the practical applications of his philosophical approach and theological approach was a religious support of Zionism and everything that went with it. And that's what we're going to take a look at today, really on the tip of the iceberg. And as we'll see at the top of this story sheet, the title is still Introduction to the Thought of Rav Kook, because we really have just begun to scratch the surface of the thought of Rav Kook. So we're going to talk a little bit about Rav Kook's approach to the national spirit, meaning to nationalism, not nationalism as a whole, and nationalism in the context of Am Yisrael, the Jewish people. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have enough time on the flip side of the page to see kind of a paragraph that I brought of Rav Kook's as a conclusion to everything that we saw. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and start. So he starts off by saying, and as we've been going through the classes, we've been getting more and more text-based, more and more kind of seeing Rav Kook on the inside. Now, this is of course still my translation, so it needs to be taken with a big grain of salt. So he says the following. Before that, I'll start off with a question. Rav Kook, there's another part of Rav Kook that we did not touch upon. He was subject to a lot of controversy during his life. He was put into cherem by the Haredi institutions and rabbis time and time again. It started off within a year of his coming to Israel in 1904. Then it continued every few years. Suddenly there was pashkevilim all over Me'asharim against him, and saying that he's a kofar, and saying these all kinds of things. And some of it was political, some of it was religious, some of it had to do with his support of the secular Zionists. Some of it had to do with the fact that he came out with the heter mechira, which was a solution to allow farmers in Israel to continue working during the Shemitah with some kind of technical halachic kind of using a loophole in halakha to allow them to continue doing so. It had to do with, time and time again, in one of his books, he wrote a paragraph which caused him to put his books in cherem. He wrote one of his books called Urot, one of his main books, he writes something along the lines of the exercise, the physical exercise that is done by the young strapling men of the chalutzim, of the pioneers, the secular pioneers, says that when they exercise their body in order to become strong and healthy, this is equal, he writes, to the Avodat Hashem, to the Torah learning of the people sitting in yeshiva. It's something along those lines. I'm not quoting it exactly. And that kind of thing obviously that infuriated people, not only because it wasn't just some guy saying this. This was a huge Talmud Chacham. No one debated the fact that he was a tremendous Talmud Chacham and a great philosopher and Ish of Machshava. You look at pictures of him, and he said that this is a person who supported people, that people exercising and getting strapping, showing muscles is equal to someone who's davening. I mean, it sounds ludicrous, especially in 1910. Okay, and I mean, there are many other things. And the truth is, when you think about it, his support in the Zionist movement really to us today maybe already seems natural, because for us, Zionism, it's something that we're used to, something that we're born into, something we take for granted. But there really were very few, if any, other rabbis. I mean, there were a lot of rabbis who said, okay, they're doing their thing, we'll do our thing, we can coexist. You don't have to fight with them, but he came out and he gave them a tremendous hug, and he supported them, and he advocated for them, and it was something which was revolutionary, which fits in well with his revolutionary approach to everything.
Did you say that it was or was it the idea that his support for?
So that kind of approach today, usually we say it's b'diavad, meaning usually we come and say if someone who's very religious, observant person, who's being very, very accepting and very close and very affectionate towards someone who's very secular towards a movement, it's not just that towards an individual. Towards an individual, okay, every individual is a Jew, you treat a Jew like a Jew. But talking about here is a movement, okay, that is coming and is actively calling, against, trying to its connection to Judaism and to Torah, and he's not only accepting it, he's saying this is religious value, and we'll see it in a moment. So I would say that's l'chatchila, and we'll see in a minute how can we. So usually would come and say, people have the say, okay, we're willing to put up with it, because we hope that if we do this, so we do that, they'll come around. That's the way most Kiruv organizations are. We love you as a Jew, because every Jew is a Jew, but you as a movement, or you as a people, or as a group, will be nice to you because, we love you as an individual, and because we know that you'll come back. And if we're nice, we'll come back. That's what I would call it, the Evet approach. Well, we'll see, Rav Kook's is not a conditional one. Okay. So the question is how could he be so, so in 1914, the second Aliyah, there's different waves of Aliyah in the history of the Zionist movement. The first one began, we usually come and say, we say that usually the first wave of Aliyah is from 1880 to 1904 is the first wave of Aliyah, Aliyah Rishonah, the first wave of Aliyah. The second one is from 1904 to 1914 till the beginning of World War I. And the first Aliyah was not a very ideological Aliyah. It was one which was sparked, a lot of it by poverty, by the Kishinev pogroms, by people who were fleeing. People were fleeing mainly to the United States, to Western Europe, to England, as well also to Palestine. Okay. The second wave of Aliyah, 1904 to 1914, was a very ideological one. Okay, these were young people who were socialists, who were getting swept up in ideas of socialism from Eastern Europe, and they came with a very, very with a purpose in mind of creating the new Jew, creating a new society. And their name, one of the movements was Bilu. It's famous, Bilu. What was Bilu? Bilu is an acronym for BAYT Yaakov Lechu V'Nelcha. The house of Yaakov, meaning the children of our people, should go. Meaning should take their destiny into their own hands, and they should go. Now the funny thing is that's a partial quote of a pasuk. The full pasuk is BAYT Yaakov Lechu V'Nelcha Be'or Hashem. Okay, the children, the family, the house of Israel should go in the name of Hashem. They cut off that part. Okay, and they were Bilu. It's not a coincidence they cut off that part. It was very intentional. Okay, so we know that either the first or second Zionist Congress, one of the resolutions was Hatzionut davar en la im hadat. Zionism has no connection or no relation to religion. Okay, so how could Rav Kook have such a support of it? Okay. So for this, we need to first understand how Rav Kook understands what is the nationalism. Okay, now he has a very long article which talks about in humanity in general, the relationship between the cosmopolitan tendency versus the national one versus the religious one, and it's but we're not going to be able to touch upon all of it. He says the following thing when it comes to talk about the nationalism within Israel. Okay, nationalism being that inclination of nationalism of the uniqueness of a grouping of people which we call a nation. Okay, so he says the following. With the first planting of this nation, okay, and we have to remember that Rav Kook's sentences are a lot of times complex. So over here it's like he gives parentheses, okay. What is it when he says this nation, okay, Am Yisrael? What is he referring to? What aspect of the nation is he going to be talking about? Okay, so with the first planting of this nation, the nation that knew to declare the clear and pure divine ideal, even while the world was strongly ruled by paganism in all of its impure wildness. Okay, so in the first planting of this nation, while all the other nations were completely immersed in all of the tumah and cruelty and of Avodah Zarah. I think we touched upon this. We see in Tanakh and Chazal when they describe Avodah Zarah seem to be tied in very, very much to the lowest aspects of human experience. So we know that Avodah Zarah, there were Avodah Zarah that included murder, Avodah Zarah that included torture, Avodah Zarah that included sexual relations, even Avodah Zarah that included one relieving themselves in public, taking the strongest parts of the human experience, but the very superficial ones, the animalistic ones, and using them and sanctifying them and saying, here, this is where I can experience the most, so we're going to take that and say that this is now divine. So this is, while all the other nations were still completely immersed in the cruelty and the immorality and the filthiness of paganism, okay, so Am Yisrael was born into a world that was filled with all of this tumah. Okay, so with the first planting of this nation, the divine desire was revealed to establish a great community which will observe the way of Hashem, doing kindness and justice. Okay, he's going to explain what he means. This desire stems from the lofty general moral demand to free mankind from the yoke of the terrible spiritual and physical constraints and bring mankind to a life of freedom, full of glory and gentleness in light of the divine ideal, thus bringing success to all mankind. So we've said this many times, his phrasing is very lyrical, it's very poetic, but basically what he's saying here is, he says, look, Am Yisrael appeared in this world with a purpose. Our purpose is, as he says here, to free mankind from the yoke of the terrible spiritual and physical constraints, to bring mankind to a life of freedom. And you have to remember, we spoke about freedom. We spoke about this not last time when we talked about kfira, about kfira heresy, but two classes ago when we spoke about freedom, where Rav Kook turned the concept of freedom on its head. And Kevin said freedom is not just freeing oneself from physical constraints. It's also one freeing himself, not being dependent on emotional, spiritual influences that are foreign to him. So freedom is the ability of someone to be true to their inner self. One's inner self is divine. One's inner self is, and that's how Rav Kook approached freedom. So he says it's to free the world. Meaning to free the world from the constraints, as he says, the terrible spiritual and physical constraints which cause humanity to be addicted to the tum'ah and cruelty of Avodah Zarah. He says that's our role in the world. That is the role of Am Yisrael. So Am Yisrael was put into this world during a time when all this was going on, and our role was to free humanity. Now, looking at it from a few thousands perspective, Baruch Hashem, we've done a pretty good job. Okay, there's Bezrat Hashem. There's still a lot of work to do. Okay, but yes, Am Yisrael has been standing there throughout history, and through first and foremost the way we've conducted ourselves and what we've taught the world has changed. Okay, but so this was our job. But in order, I'm in this third paragraph. In order to fulfill this desire to free the world, okay, to make it to bring success to all of mankind. In order to fulfill this desire, this community, Davka needs, you can't translate Davka. This community, Davka needs to have a social and political state, a sovereign national throne at the height of human culture, a smart and wise people, a great nation. It's a quote from a pasuk. With the absolute divine ideal rules, giving life to the nation and the land. What is it that he's saying here? Okay, and now he's gonna each paragraph here explains a little further. And I don't think I need to explain it too much because I think this is actually fairly easy to understand what he's saying. But it's a very powerful, poignant point. So that all will know that not only individual outstanding geniuses, pious ones, monks, and holy people live in the light of the divine ideal, but even entire nations with all their sophisticated culture and political systems, entire nations, including all of the different classes of society, from the height of their artistic intelligentsia, the aesthetic, the educated, and the holy, as well as the wider social, political, and economical masses, the broadest sense of the term, even the lowliest and most materialistic. So what is it that he's saying here? He's saying, and he extrapolates on this in a lot of other places. You look at Mr. Jew and Mr. Goy, you might not find that much of a difference. It is possible for Mr. Jew, Mr. and Mrs. Jew, to be horrible human beings. And it is very possible for Mr. and Mrs. Goy to be wonderful human beings. Rav Kook very much does not belong to the school of thought that says every Jew, by definition, is a good person, or every Goy, even if he looks like he's a tzaddik, must be cruel, must be a Russia. No, absolutely not. Says you look at individual Mr. Mrs. Jew, Mr. Mrs. Goy, you might not find any difference. Yes, we say one has a neshama, one does not have a neshama. What does that mean? Rav Kook talks about that in great length in other places. It means that neshama means that it is part of something which has much higher potential. The person who has a neshama, Mr. Mrs. Jew, can become a navi. Someone who's not Jewish, according to this, cannot, whatever. But we're not talking about that now. It says, but you look at just Mr. Mrs. Jew, Mr. Mrs. Guy. There isn't necessarily any difference in the way they live their life, whether they're good people, not good people, moral people, not moral people. Okay, that's not where the difference lies. Okay? You don't have to be Jewish to be able to be a good human being, to be a moral human being, to lead a good and just and even a holy life. Okay? Not everyone would agree with this. Rav Kook says the difference does not lie in the individuals. There are plenty of individuals who can be tzaddikim. We have the idea. We have this idea. Chasidu mata olam. Okay? That's not the point. That's not what is going to change the world. That is not what is going to lead humanity. He says only a nation with all of the faculties of a nation. What are the faculties of a nation? A land, sovereignty, a language, a culture, an economic system, a artistic framework, literature. That is what impacts the world, what impacts history is people. You can have great individuals who will also have an impact, but what actually changes humanity is a culture, is a people, is a group of people, for the better or for the worse. Okay? Again, you can have individuals who stand out. You can have an individual like Aristotle who stands out, but Aristotle on his own does nothing. People who goes, and I'm just using this as an example, we're coming up on Hanukkah, so philosophy and whatever. But people, the Greek people who brought certain things to the world for the better and for the worse. But it's a people who have a real impact on history. So I'll read it again, so that all will know that not only individual outstanding geniuses, pious ones, monks, and holy people live in the light of the divine ideal. He said it's not just a matter of being to impact the world. It says it's more than that. Is that if one individual can live a life of piety, then Jewish or non-Jewish doesn't make a difference. And I look at it and come and say, okay, this could be a fluke. This could be because only individuals who are special can live the full ideal. But you come and you have an entire nation that has people who are intelligent and unintelligent, people who are with stronger morality and lower morality, and you have an entire community, not community, an entire nation that is able to live with a certain direction and moral code, and with following the word of Hashem and divine and all the chukim, mishpatim, an entire society. This proves. It's not just that this has an effect. First and foremost, this proves the theory. This proves that the world can lead a life of morality, that the world can lead a life, the world as a world can lead a life of purpose and meaning and holiness. If you think about it this way, Kook talks about this in another place. If you look at Sefer Bereshit, it's the parashat that we're in. Look at Sefer Bereshit. So it's like the beginning, Hashem does not yet have a unique people. There's Adam and his lineage, and you have Dor HaMabul, and that messes up. They weren't able to live up to the ideal that Hashem expected, what Hashem expected from humanity, and they fail, and everything's destroyed. And then there's another attempt. Humanity, again, Hashem puts his trust, so to say, in humanity, and humanity again fails with Migdal Bavel. And at that point, it's as if Hashem is saying, okay, we got to concentrate our effort. Let's take the theory and implement it with one people. It's as if you have a school and you come and say, look, I want to achieve something. I want a certain level of excellence, and I expect so and so. And you know what? We're going to take one class, and we're going to focus on that class. And once we show that it can work with an entire class, we will know. We will all know. The entire school will know. The entire community will know. The entire world will know that, look, if you take one guy and you tutor him, one kid, and he receives excellence, okay, of course, one person. With one person, anything can be possible. Take an entire class. Some of them have a high IQ, some have a low IQ, some of them come from strong socioeconomic backgrounds, some of them come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, some of them have no learning disabilities, and some of them do have some learning disabilities. You have all options in there, all tendencies, all strengths and weaknesses, and it works. Now we know that Hashem's word, Hashem's expectation of the world, and the tools that Hashem gives the world and infuses into the world, they can be relevant for everyone. They can be implemented on a large scale. So only a nation with all the faculties of a nation will prove and will show and will express the fact that it's possible. Yes?
Is he saying that it's not because of some intrinsic propensity to tzedekah or anything like that? Is he saying it's because the nation, once you have the institutions, you have the capacity to increase a greater propensity, you normalize this value system.
Okay.
Therefore, it produces more.
I hear what you're saying. Meaning, what is the cause? What is the effect? Yeah. You're saying, what's the chicken? What's the egg? Just like with the chicken and the egg, neither one is the beginning. I'd say that first of all, there is Rav Kook does hold, although he doesn't touch upon it right now here in this, but he expounds on it to a great degree in other places. Yes, there is an neshama. There is an intrinsic quality that Am Yisrael as a whole have. Okay, as a whole have, which also reveals itself in individuals. We call that your neshama. Your neshama, my neshama. But our neshama is part of a greater thing, okay, which is called the neshama of Am Yisrael as a whole. But it's a whole other. I'll give you a quick example. So it says in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, very, very famous quote. We all know it. Ve'amech kulam tzadikim. Or Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek l'olam haba. Use that one from Avot. Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek l'olam haba. All of Am Yisrael have a part in the world to come. And then the Mishnah goes on to say, Ve'elu she'en lehem chelek l'olam haba. And these are the people who don't have a part in the world to come. So a famous question is, wait a second, you said all of Israel have a place in the world to come, and these don't. Decide those guys. Either they all do, or all except these. Say all of Am Yisrael have except these. It doesn't say except. It says all have, and these don't have. So the answer that Rav Kook's approach gives is, look, there's Olam Haba of two kinds. There's Olam Haba that it's like you're part of a family, okay? And you can never leave this family. And this family has something about it. There's two Olam Haba. There's Olam Haba that you're part of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael as a whole is the Madrega of Olam Haba, of a certain connection, intrinsic connection, which is just a given, a connection to Hashem, a closeness to Hashem, a divine aspect within it, within Am Yisrael, that you're part of this family. Now you can act as if you're not part of this family. Okay? We can disown you. But that's a secondary level. You'll always genetically be part of this family. We can deny it. You can deny it. You might be deserving of a punishment to be banished from the family. And we won't call you by your name, and you won't identify by it, and you'll be cut off from the family. And everyone will say he's not part of that family. But you'll never escape the fact that you are. Genetically, you're part of the family. So we're not going to treat you like that because you don't deserve it anymore. Maybe Chas Chilul, not you, right? So Kol Yisrael Yishlam Chalak Olam Haba, as a whole, as a collective, we're part of the Olam Haba. But as individuals, you might not deserve Olam Haba. So it's like two slices of a pie. There's like two pies. One is the fact that you're part of the community. You're part of the pie, but you might not get an extra piece. You might not get a piece for your own personal actions. So it's causing. So I kind of flew off topic, but only a little bit, because saying no, there is something intrinsic about Am Yisrael, okay, which allows them to then develop all of those systems and constructs and all those things based on the Torah, based on what we were taught. But there's the famous midrash when Hashem goes around and offers each one of the nations the Torah. Okay, so the Maharal explains it's not like we taught like this diminished like children, when rather we accepted it because there's something about us that has a tendency towards it. So we were created with an inclination that can then receive the Torah and follow, not always, but basically follow the rules, follow the laws. But the two are dependent on each other. But first, yes, there is intrinsic quality and tendency, and based on that comes the choices, the actions, the constructs, and all those things. Does that answer the question?
Right. I mean, as a modern example, right? You'd say that the experience of Shabbat in most of Eretz Yisrael, right, is for even people who are completely chiluni, like there's still something that is pervasive.
Yeah, that's an excellent.
Still say Shabbat Shalom, even though they have no intention of.
I love that example. I think it's a fantastic example. I'll give you another example. Someone in Israel today, completely secular, let's say he's a Burna Maretz, he knows nothing. Okay, he still leads his year, still follows the Jewish year. Okay, because of Chagim. Because it's a Jewish state. We'll get that in a minute. So by default, okay, he's speaking Hebrew. He's paying taxes he's paying taxes to what? What? He's speaking Hebrew.
We hope he's
paying taxes, which is supporting the Jewish state. He is serving the Israeli army. And even if he doesn't like it, or even if he says, I'm just doing it because I want to protect my family, he's protecting a state, a country and a nation that reflects something. Or the example of Shabbat. So a person it can go around saying, I'm going to Chal Shabbat from the first second it comes into the next, but you cannot live in Israel and not feel that it's Shabbat. The siren's going off 10 minutes before this, everyone in the street's going, there's less cars, TV is there, everything around it is Shabbat. So yes, that's the Amech Kulam Tzadikim. The society is a society, regardless of your actions. Okay. So he goes and says again. He says that that the purpose of Am Yisrael's existence is to prove a point. Let's prove a point, to be an expression of the fact that Hashem appears in the divine, the Elokut appears in this world as a powerful thing in a total comprehensive way, in a way that can include an entire nation. Because if something can happen for an entire nation, it can be for the entire world. Because he's talking about a complex construct of a whole society with all of its complexities. So if a nation can live with these ideals and morality and strive for holiness, then that means this can be done by everyone, and therefore it impacts the world, and therefore because of Am Yisrael is able as a nation to live this ideal, sometimes a little bit better, sometimes a little bit worse. It then also goes and impacts the world and transforms the world and advances the world from the darkness of paganism thousands of years ago to where we are today. A lot of work still to do, but it can't compare where we are today to where the humanity was 600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. Okay, the next paragraph. Now, how does this translate into Rav Kook's embrace of secular nationalism and secular Zionism? I think it's a very short leap, but we're going to see. He goes on to say the following: so connected is the spirit of the people of Israel. When he talks about the spirit of the people of Israel, he means that the feeling of Israeli nationalism. Okay, meaning he's talking about early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, when the majority, of Jews who kind of got swept up in the Zionist movement in the second wave of Aliyah from 1904 to 1914, even afterwards. They were very much influenced by the rise of nationalism in Europe in the second half of the 19th century. And like we said, they were not coming to Israel because they wanted to reestablish, because they believed in this was a messianic era, or they wanted to reestablish the kingdom of Judah, nothing like that. Okay, they got swept up. He said, nation, the uniqueness of communities and the national spirit. So he says, so connected is the spirit of the people of Israel with the spirit of Hashem, that even one who says he doesn't rely in any way on the spirit of Hashem, but at the same time says he desires the spirit of Israel, in the spirit of the people, the spirit of Hashem resides in his internal desire, even against his own will. The individual can disconnect himself from the source of life, but not so the nation of Israel. Because a person can say from the beginning, from the moment he wakes to the moment he sleeps, say, I believe in secular nationalism, secular Zionism, secular. Tzionut davar en lei madat. You can make a resolution and say that Zionism has nothing to do with religion. Say it from morning to night. It doesn't change the fact that when you talk about the Israeli nationalism, meaning the character of the communal character of the Jewish people, call it what you want. Call it secular, call whatever you want. When you talk about the collective identity of the Jewish people, you've said something which is divine. You don't have to call it by its name. By the way, this is very similar to what we saw that Rav Kook did when he talked about kfira. He said, remember we said when we told the story of when some secular person got up and he was yelling at Rav Kook, you come to teach us this nonsense and this doesn't make sense and this is ridiculous, and lashing out at Rav Kook, and Rav Kook lets him go through his whole rant, and then he says to him, "B'Torah she'ata kofer, gam ani lo ma'amin." The Torah that you say that you don't believe in, that you are kofir in, I don't believe in that either. Saying, yeah. So you can say all day, we believe in the strengthening or identifying or bringing out the character, the communal character of our nation as a secular identity. Call it what you want. The reality is, if you're looking and you're trying to strengthen, this is where we'll get to in a second, and to bring out the communal character of the Jewish people. That's what we said before, because the communal character of the Jewish people is one which in its most fundamental way, at its core, is one which strives and has the quality of improving the world and freeing the world of the bondage of paganism and immorality and tumah. So when you say the national characteristics of the Jewish people, you're saying something which is divine, whether you realize it or not, whether you know what to call it or not. Goes on to say, therefore, the possessions of the nation. I wasn't sure if to translate it as possessions or faculties. In Hebrew, we use the word kinyanim, which is like something which you. So I translate it as possessions. Therefore, the possessions of the nation, which it is fond of as part of their national spirit, are all filled with the spirit of Hashem, its land, language, history, and customs. So they're saying We're a nation, like any other nation. And normal nations have lands. So we should also have a land, because that's what normal nations do. And we're going to push to have Hebrew, because a normal nation, one of the qualities of a nation is to have a distinct language. So we're going to revive the Hebrew language, not because it's Lashon HaKodesh, not because it's holy, but because we want to have our own distinct, this is our distinct language. It's part of having a distinct culture, just like all the other national movements in 19th century Europe. So Rav Kook says, I don't care what you're saying. The land of Israel is holy. The language of Israel is holy. What else does he bring here? The history of Israel is holy, and the customs, they're holy, not because, regardless of what you say, because they are part of our mission. They are part of our ability to live a full life of a community, of a nation, which is moral and holy, and therefore transforms and impacts the world. So, and if a time of awakening comes, when all these will be said exclusively in the name of the national spirit, of nationalism, and an attempt is made to devoid all the national faculties from the spirit of Hashem. When he says, if a time comes, he's not talking about a hypothetical time. He's talking about now, meaning now, 1904 to 1914. When you had these ideologies, you had Brenner, and you had Echad Ha'am, and you had all these great, really, thinkers. Bialik, he had a very religious tendency towards him. But Brenner, Echad Ha'am, Aleph Dalet Gordon, many of these other thinkers of the beginning of the they were very much doing exactly this. He's not talking about if a time comes hypothetically. If a time comes right now. Okay? So if a time comes when all these things, language, the land, the culture, all these things are being embraced, or being said, oh, this has nothing to do with religion, okay, nothing to do with our ideals, our religious ideals, and an attempt is made to devoid. So an active attempt is made to say that this land is not holy because of God. This language is not holy. And an active attempt is made to remove the feeling of holiness from these things. Okay? So, and an attempt is made to devoid all the national faculties from the spirit of Hashem. What should the righteous of that generation do? Should they rebel against the national spirit, even if just verbally? Should they come out and start saying, no, the nation is not, the land is not important? Ivrit is a good example. There was something called the Milchemet HaSafot, big debate that went on in 1910, 1913, 1924, 1927, during those specific years. Should the official language be Hebrew, German, Yiddish, and a lot of the seculars are pushing for Hebrew because this is our language. Let's revive it, not because it's holy, because it's and let's make up new words and new phrases and Eliezer ben Yehuda. So, and a lot of people are talking out against it, because if the seculars are pushing for it, we should push against it. So should they rebel against the national spirit, even if just verbally? To repel the national possessions? This is not possible. This is not possible. The spirit of Hashem and the spirit of Israel is one and the same. You can't talk about the character of the Jewish people as a community in a separate way, in a distinct way from the spirit, what he calls the spirit of Hashem, meaning the role that Hashem gives us in the world, Hashem's purpose for us. The two things cannot be separated. So you can't come and start talking about all these communal possessions or faculties of the Jewish people in any other way. Rather, what should they do, the righteous of the generation? They must labor, a great labor, to reveal the light and holiness which is in the national spirit, to the point where all those who hold these opinions that there's no connection between Jewish nationalism and religion, And to the point where all those who hold these opinions and those possessions will already, those who hold these opinions and those possessions will already find themselves deeply rooted and living in a divinely inspired life. Meaning, we need to reveal to these people who are working so hard to build the Jewish nation, okay, from a secular perspective. Okay? But we should not try to convince them that this is wrong, because it isn't wrong. We just need to explain to them that by them doing this is not wrong, this is good, but not for the same reason they think. Not because it's just simple, okay, let's be a nation like any other nation. No, you should build the nation and care about the land and the culture and the army and the economy and the art and all these other things and the literature. Of course you should care about them, but not simply because we want to be just like any other nation, but because if you do it with these special qualities and characteristics that we have, then it can be so much more. It has within it the ability to be so much more than what you think. So yes, delve into building the land of Israel, because the land of Israel is holy. It's not just that it's important. It's not just that the land of Israel can help us protect ourselves from our enemies, that we can live in peace. That's not enough. So yes, it's great that you want to build the land because you want to live in peace and run away from anti-Semitism. Okay. But that's only the beginning. That's it. There's so much more. Love the land, build the economy, go to the army, pay your taxes, speak Hebrew. But because by doing those things, you're doing so much more than what you think. You are bringing into this world a huge plan of Hashem and a character that we have as a people, which can lead to a tremendous to revealing morality and holiness on a global level, and impacting the world as we have for 3,000 years. So what we need to do is to reveal to the people who are doing all these great things, which is to realize that they're just misunderstanding what they're doing. Continue doing it. So partner with them, so why did Rav Kook give a tremendous hug to these people? Because regardless of what they were saying, they were doing a holy work. They're building the nation of Am Yisrael. Which means that they're building the world. They're creating a model which will eventually, I think already. Look what blessing the Jewish state is to the whole world, through technology, through I think it's only a matter of time, next 10, 20 years, that our whole dealings with the Arabs will teach a whole new lesson to the world about dealing with evil. We're only 65 years old, but to realize that when you go to the army and you're fighting, you're not just protecting your family, you're protecting the free world. So of course go to the army. Tremendous. So what should we do? Should we criticize them? No. Help them and make them realize, teach ourselves and teach them that all these things that the love that they have for the Israeli nationalism is great, fantastic, but for so much more than what they think. And in the meantime, hug them, because look what they're doing. They're doing something tremendous. They're building the Jewish state. They're building the Jewish people. In 1914, this might have sounded like what he's talking about. 1914, only like a 5% of the Jewish people were living in Israel. Now, 100 years later, this was written somewhere around 1910, 1914, 100 years later, way more than 50% of the Jewish people, regardless of what the studies say, much more than 50% of the Jewish people is in the land of Israel. It's a center of Judaism to the world. There's more Torah being learned there than anywhere in the world or at any point in history. We all know this, okay? What has been achieved in the last 65 years is mind-boggling. It's a miracle. It's a miracle upon a miracle upon a miracle. So when Rav Kook is talking about these things, the great impact that building the Jewish state and building the Jewish land and the Jewish culture can bring. So 100 years ago, people say, what are you talking about? 98% of Am Yisrael is in Europe, or Europe and around the world. Now, today, we read this and obviously we see, of course, he's right. Look how right he was. Those people that built the country, built the army, built the economy, built the culture, look what's been created. There's a lot more to go. But let's reveal, let's understand what's hiding beneath it. We need to, don't pay attention to what's coming out of the mouth. Look at what they're actually doing. Amazing. So that's really tip of the iceberg, his approach to the national spirit. The fact that what is the role of Am Yisrael in the world, and therefore what should be the attitude towards all those national faculties and as he calls them, possessions, all those things in which the character of Am Yisrael as a community comes out. And those are the things which are communal. Okay, those are things like the land, the economy, the culture, all those things that define us as a large community, a whole society. I just want to quickly, as a summary to the five sessions that we've had, the 5 things that we've had, very quickly, I brought on the flip side, a paragraph, kind of as a, before I come and say, so you can see, if you look at any of the writings, of the time of Kook, 1910, that era, no religious thinker is talking about Zionism in this way. Even those, and there were many, who supported the Zionist movement, did it as a technical thing. So they'll do their thing, we do our thing, and we can work together. There were, of course, those who come and said, absolutely not, push it away. But let's say the Mizrahi, everyone says Rav Kook was the rabbi of the Mizrahi. That's not true. The Mizrahi was willing to go for Uganda at some point. The Mizrahi came and said, let us live in our corner and we live together. You give us this, Rav Kook came and said, no, I want you, the whole Zionist movement, to realize what your role is. I want to take you over. When it comes, I want to convert you. I want to continue doing what you're doing. Just let me teach you what you're doing. He took it and he turned it upside down. He left it as it was, but turned it upside down. He says, continue doing everything you're doing. Just look at it this way, and how much more significant it will be. So again, paradigm shifting. Okay, I want to read this very quickly. Typical Rav Kook paragraph. True spiritual movement is infused with all of the movements that came before it, and is filled with worlds and generations. What does he mean? Different things pushed it. Spiritual movement. He says that any spiritual movement that takes place must be, whether you realize it or not, is all the things that have come before, and all these spiritual and social things, movements that happened that preceded it, in some way are part of any new thing that happens in history. Okay, it's talking about large-scale social and spiritual movements. He says everything that happens brings about the next stage. So he says the following: different things pushed it. The revealed and concealed parts of Torah, philosophy, the later Enlightenment, so in the 18th century, Agadah, the more spiritual sides of Torah, Pilpul, Chibat Zion, the revival of the nation and literature, the workers' movement. When he says the workers' movement, he means the 1917. Revolution, the Chassidut, the cosmopolitan tendencies of Western Europe, the awakening of the Muslim movement, the strengthening of Torah, the ascetic and fundamentalist tendencies, criticism. When he says criticism, he's talking about biblical criticism, and art. Dwindling of, it brings a whole list of all kinds of social, philosophical, spiritual movements that have happened throughout the centuries. It's talking about, depending on what, 5, 6, 8, even 10 centuries previous to his time. It says all of these things, each of these individual visions is not an entire world. None of them are a complete truth. Now, when he says none of them are complete truth, he's also including in that list the revealed and concealed parts of Torah, Pilpul, Agadah. He's not just talking about the rise of nationalism or the awakening of the... He's saying none of these things are the entire truth. Each of these individual visions is not an entire world. And some of them are defined as a sickness and complete evil. Some of them are even evil. But when all these visions unite and come together with their causes and sources, each tendency finds its place according to its worth. Then they create a formation, and the food and waste each serve their role, to the point where even the evils and false imaginations, even they serve some purpose of causation. I'll stop here. He's basically Rav Kook. This is something I've been holding off from saying the entire time. All of the things that we've seen start from a very fundamental approach that Rav Kook has. And it's actually a very classic one. Everything in the world has divinity in it. Leit atar panu minei. Everything exists within Hashem. Everything exists within Hashem's existence is one of the famous phrases. Nothing is devoid of purpose and meaning. Things exist in the world because Hashem wants them to exist. That is the spark that sustains them in this world. So everything has within it an itzot. Everything is divine, has divinity within it. Not everything is divine. Everything has divinity in it. Everything has a purpose, and that is why it's in this world. And if so, Rav Kook labors his entire life, all of his philosophy is based in that, is identifying within everything what is its divine spark, what is its purpose, what purpose does it serve in the grand scheme, in the grand picture of creating a world which is moral and holy. And he says, and therefore when he talks about freedom, about the new feeling of freedom and the enlightenment, he says even though it's being used to trash and destroy religion, something in it must be right and divine, otherwise it would not appear in this world on such a large scale. It would not transform humanity. Let's find what it is. Authenticity, being true to yourself. He takes that, he says, there's divinity in this idea of being true to oneself, which is now called freedom. And he turns and he translates that into empowers understanding of Torah through that. And he does the same thing with the sacrifice. And he does the same thing with kfira. That if so many people are questioning, then something about questioning is needed. It is important, and that we need that is not being dealt with. And that's his and the nationalistic spirit. That is holy. Let's find how it's holy. And let's focus on that, and let's empower that. As everything. We talked about the relation between Torah and science, so he did that as well. And he went to show how all of the scientific theories have within them a positive impact on humanity at some point in history. So he basically comes and says this idea again that the whole world is like, he says in other places, imagine like one huge organ. Okay, like a human being. So you need to know that this is a hand, and this is a finger, and this is a heart, and this is a head, and it's all part of one harmonious thing. You just got to know where everything fits in and what the role of each thing is, but it's all part of one big purpose. Everything has divinity within it. So he said that's a role his philosophy is all about that, finding each one of the things. This is its role. This is its place in the puzzle to create this beautiful picture. So this is what he says over here again. I'll just read the last sentence that he said. He said, but when all these visions unite and come together with their causes and sources, each tendency finds its place according to its worth. That's the hard part. What is its worth? Not everyone can come and say what the worth is. This is what Kook tries to do. What is its actual worth? What is the part of it that's the good part? That's the constructive part? Then they create a formation. They all fall into place and create something of form. And the food and the waste, the ochel and the psolet, each serve their role. To the point where even the evils and false imaginations, even they serve some purpose of causation. Because sometimes, like with kfira, something which is bad brings about something which is good. Okay? So this is the idea, a very harmonious understanding of the world, of existence. And therefore, everything must have its role and its place, its positive place. It's a very optimistic view of reality. It's a very, very again, optimistic one, which believes in reality, believes in the human spirit, believes in everything, and takes and a love for everything, and finding what that piece is, and kind of cleaning out all the other things and saying this is its role, and this is where this fits, and this is where this fits, and this is where this fits, and that is how we eventually come to the understanding that this whole world is filled with divinity and can become and should be and has an aspect where it is a screen through which Hashem is revealed to this world and empowers it and makes it better, more moral, and more holy. And that is the fundamental aspect of Rav Kook that we've seen in all of the different shurim that we've seen. And again, this is just the introduction, as there's so much more. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking as you're describing this is like the Torah in terms of the ingredients,
yeah.
Right? Some which are...
One of them, the chalbana, smells bad on its own.
Right.
But with the other things...
So as he's saying, though, that you can assemble these things together to fit them in like a puzzle. But is there something more to it that it's actually part of the internal dialogue, cross-pollination, collaboration, discussion between those
yes.
elements
Yes,
that
definitely.
That is the synthesis.
Yes.
That is something. It's not just a 1 + 1 + 1 is 3.
Yeah.
It's 1 + 1 + 1 equals
10.
12.
Yeah. Because of the dynamics between them and how they interact with each other. 100%.
So that would
100%.
That would predicate then that there must not only be coexistence, but there actually has to be dialogue. And
the word I would
100%.
100%. I would say it's not just a matter of coexistence; it's a matter of harmony. And harmony comes not just from each piece being in it. It's the play within them. I'll give you an example. He has a whole piska, which. Yeah. He has a whole paragraph which I wanted to bring, but there just wasn't enough time. Where he comes and says that we see today, now he's talking about his generation, 3 main forces that are battling amongst themselves. He says 3 main tendencies. Okay, this is in the early 20th century. He says the first is the nationalistic tendency. Those people who are just pushing to emphasize the feeling of nationality, of nationalism. Okay, and he says, and then you have the what do you call it? He calls it the universalistic approach. Ones who are pushing not to talk about the Jewish people, and this is very relevant for today also. Those who are pushing, emphasizing as much as possible, not that necessarily we are distinct people, rather we are part of the family of man. Okay, not to continuously emphasize how we are distinct and unique and different, rather how the family of man. And you have the third camp, which is he calls the religious one, which comes and is focusing exclusively on the religious side of life, on the ones of tradition and of religious practice. And he says that they're battling between them. And they keep, and each one's trying to pull the blanket completely to his side, okay, and saying that the whole truth lies only with them. And it gives a beautiful interpretation on saying how that in itself is, meaning that in itself is what gives us the truth. The fact that they're battling against the fact that he says each side needs to realize that their job is to pull with all their strength towards their direction, because when the other side is doing it the same, pulling it completely in their direction, they will end up somewhere in the middle. Meaning, as a whole, the nation will end up somewhere in the middle. He says each one will again, each one, it's like, it sounds crazy, like I'm supposed to be arguing with full strength that I'm right, but knowing that because you're putting up an opposition, you're putting up opposition to me, and you're pulling a different direction, that therefore for the whole, this is what's needed. Because that means that each one of us will not be able to actually pull the blanket to the extreme. Okay? But if I relent too much, then we're going to end up on your extreme. Okay? So I got to argue the strongest and pull the strongest to my extreme, knowing that you need to do the same. Okay, but this requires me to understand that there is true value to what you're saying. It's just not my emphasis. So I will pull my fullest strength to my direction, and knowing that I need to do so in order to counter this. This is easy for me to understand, because look, you're pulling so much in that direction, I got to do the opposite. But I need to value you, that you're keeping me from my extreme. And I'm keeping you from your extreme, and he's keeping us. So that each one of these 3 forces is pulling in the direction, but understanding that they're doing so in order to moderate the other, and the other is doing so to moderate them. It says, and that gives us the wealth of options, and the wealth of options and diversity, and that gives us all the possibilities. So that's exactly what you're talking about. Okay, it's not just the fact that comes and says, oh look, there's value in universalism, there's value in nationalism, there's value in religious practice. He's saying, no, it's not just that, like peace, and a peace, and a peace. He's saying, no, they're like this, but they're like, each one's pulling, but look at that, look how much movement is happening, because he's pulling here, he's pulling here, he's pulling over here, and look at that, then there's bouncing back and forth, and there's movement, and that's constructive. Some individuals might find themselves comfortable being completely over here. Mm-hmm. Okay. And some individuals, but as a society that has all 3, that are continuously interacting between themselves, pulling here, he says, fantastic. That gives you movement. That gives you growth.